mass that we've been played in this way by some very clever but evil people, that these people like Nix and you know, the data analytical Steve Bannon types, they've been in the puppets in the hands of this extreme right oligarchy, both in Russia and America, because the same team have played America and given us Trumpism. I think there should be a mass revulsion, and part of the work of the World Intellectual Forum here in Europe is to help channel and lead and direct that revulsion, so that we wake up from our slumber, because we can't like jump to enlightenment from a place of meltdown and chaos and immorality. We have to go through basic sila morality, which is truth-telling, kindness, compassion. And then you can build up the higher levels towards enlightenment. The Brexit lot, it's a fantasy. It's we'll smash Scottish, we'll smash Northern Ireland, we'll smash democracy. We'll just do a fantasy, you know, and only the elites, the very wealthy, will benefit. And even them not long term, because as their culture comes crashing down around them, you know, it's just going to end up a nightmare. So expose that Russian interference. That's a job for intellectuals, but also ordinary people to really activate our intellect, to activate our own higher intelligence so we can see through what's been done. It's interesting that we've just had the birthday of Robert the Bruce, who was the great, I don't know, he wasn't probably an intellectual, but he was behind the Declaration of Arbroath, which was a pretty clever move. They wrote to the then Pope, just pointing out that, hey, Scotland's a separate country. We won't be conquered and run by these vicious, nasty military types that keep coming up from England, who weren't actually even really English. They were sort of international crusading warlord types who just had, you know, hijacked the English state, really. And so, yeah, dear old Robert the Bruce, we honour his birthday that just went, and coincidentally one of my dear friends in Scotland, Morag, has the same birthday. So hello Morag, happy birthday. And to all that are struggling for Scottish independence, I think now is your time. I can't see a way out of the problems of the UK until Scotland gets complete independence and can rejoin us in the family of European nations. And England and Wales will eventually wake up and realise they've been played and want to join in. And we can all live happily ever after again. You know, Scotland will have to lead the charge on this. I want to also say that I've been carrying on with my work on the Quran. I'm coming up to the end of my commentary. And it's just fun. I've just been working on a wonderful verses called the Thunder, which is Surah 13. But I'm doing the commentary in chronological sequence. It's never been attempted before. Nobody's ever had the, I don't know what, to do a commentary in the chronological order. But I'm a historian, so of course that's what I've done. To me, the Quran doesn't make sense if you don't read it chronologically. It's in order of length, which is ridiculous. If you put the New Testament in order of length of the different books, I mean, you know, it wouldn't make sense. So I'm kind of trying to explain what the Quran actually is and what it means in its historical and chronological context. And I've come to Surah 13, or in my sequence, it's Surah 96 out of 114. I'm coming to the end. And it's about thunder. And it's about the God of thunder, you know. And Muhammad is constantly saying, like, get with the message, guys. There is a God. There is a one who's doing all this stupendous stuff in nature. It is he who doth show you the lightning, by way both of fear and of hope. It is he who doth raise up the clouds, heavy with fertilizing rain. Nay, thunder repeateth his praises, and so do the angels with awe. He flingeth the loud-voiced thunderbolts, and therewith he striketh whomsoever he will. And yet, there are the men who dare to dispute about God with the strength of his power supreme. For him alone is prayer in truth. You know, it's a very beautiful surah, this, and it's in Medina. It's as Muhammad is building the early ummah, the early community of Muslims. And he's just pointing out, look at nature. Look at the wonders of nature, the stupendous, awesome wonders. How can you not think there's a creative or divine intelligence behind all this? I feel the same, you know, as a Druid and as a Christian, a philosopher, a Sufi, jnanic yogi, Kabbalist, whatever, you know, I've got all the different labels. I know exactly what Muhammad is saying here and why this is channeled through him. It is a sign of our ability to tune into the cosmic intelligence. Our own intelligence has to respond with praise and awe and love. And the state of Islam, which is like surrender to its majesty. Now, where I live here in the middle of France is Druid country, and it's thunder and lightning country. So we have patches of very hot weather, and then after a few days it clouds over and we get incredible thunderstorms. Like you wouldn't believe. I go out to the local fields at the back here, and you can watch 20 miles of skyscape, incredibly complicated clouds, with lightning going off every couple of seconds in all different directions, and then thunder eventually coming and, you know, reaching you. It's like watching a movie show. Now, if you study science, you know that lightning is very important to fertilize the soil. It nitrogenates the soil. It fixes nitrogen into the soil, and without that, the soil wouldn't be fertile. So lightning is part of the divine ecology's plan for life on Earth. And so Muhammad intuits that, and he knows that that's so important. Now it's interesting, the Druids called the god of lightning Tyrannus. Round here, that was the god of the Gauls. And also in Britain, he was the god of thunder and lightning to the Druids. And he was symbolised by a white bull. Near where I live, there are lots of white bulls, and I always think Tyrannus when I see them, and especially when it starts thunder and lightning. Now, the Gauls said, when Caesar turned up this stupid army, they said, okay, hello, Julius, you know, your Jupiter chap is the same as our Tyrannus. And Caesar obviously went off and died, but the Romans didn't go that quickly, and eventually the Druids accepted, okay, Rome's here to stay for a few hundred years, and they built temples to Tyrannus Jupiter. And you find statues and stelae engravings where Tyrannus and Jupiter were identified. That's the god that Muhammad also intuits, the absolute. Because Jupiter's the king of the gods, right? That's the Roman way of saying he's the supreme god. The Greeks called him Zeus. And they said he's the king of the gods, he's the top god, he's the god of thunder and lightning. You don't argue with him. Well, that's what Muhammad is saying. You don't argue with the god of thunder and lightning. And I would say the same. And so that's what I'm trying to do in the commentary, is give a sort of universal philosophical take on these amazing surahs. I think probably for the first time. I don't know any other commentary that's gone into this. And I'm trying to make this available not just to Muslims, but to non-Muslims or even anti-Muslims. There's a lot of Islamophobes around who don't get Islam. They think it's horrible. They can't stand it, you know. I'm trying to make this book come back to the universal heritage of all of us. There's stuff in here that is mind-blowingly, beautifully amazing. But it needs to be uncoded, you know, to become a truly universal book for all of us. There's also stuff in there that probably could be, you know, is less enlightened. And one of the points I make is that, yes, this was channeled through a chap, Muhammad, a normal guy, and he has his off days, as we all do. You know, some of my talks are better than others. Some of my writings are better than others. You can't be tip-top 100% all the time. There are moments of tremendous, crackling, amazing to die for insight in the Quran. And then there are sort of routine stuff, like who gets which inheritance when somebody dies, you know. It needed to be in there because he was setting up a community. But it's not, you know, riveting to die for, jump out of your seats with excitement stuff. Well, you know, that's just life, isn't it? So I'm trying to explain all this. Anyway, you can listen to it on my website, globalgreenuniversity.com. It's there. I've given it out to the world. You know, you can listen to it. And if you want to call me a heretic, well, you know, I'm happy to have a debate with you. I think I'm the complete and utter opposite of a heretic. I'm so orthodox. I'm trying to find orthodoxy within all the traditions, you know, and then try and find where they meet. I feel like someone that's, you know, just finding the ocean for the first time, and everyone else has been, you know, sitting by their rivers saying, my river's the ocean. Well, I'm following all the rivers back down to the actual ocean, and that to me is the supreme orthodoxy. Okay, and I'm not alone. You know, Fritjof Schuon and Aldous Huxley and many other great thinkers have been doing this for a long time. I'm just, you know, the latest guy on the block, really. The others seem to keep dying off. So now I'm coming to the next thing I want to celebrate in this talk. Oh, sorry about this. I seem to have an attack of. Oh dear. Right. Okay, so I want to celebrate also, I've just published today, 12th of July, something I've spent 4 years working on called the Book of the Egg. This Book of the Egg has been a long time being hatched, and I'm really joyous about this. Finally, on this beautiful day in July, it's been published. I've spent so long on this, about 4 years actually, and I've been writing it slowly. Originally, I was going to write this with a colleague of mine from Slovenia, who then wasn't able to do it for various reasons. So I wrote it with a scientist up in Scotland that I knew, vaguely. I thought he was a friend. Fortunately, he pulled out of his essays at the very last minute, leaving me high and dry. So I've had to publish it missing the 4 essays he wrote, which was dealing with the science side. Now, the whole point is a sort of overview of what eggs are, etc. I've given the philosophical side of it. My friend Eva's contributed a chapter on the science, and I'm hoping I'll get some other scientists to do the missing chapters eventually. I've looked at the symbolism of eggs in archetypal psychology. I've looked at it through a Jungian perspective. Eggs are really interesting. They crop up. I've looked at it through cosmologies, because often people's cultures believe that everything starts with the egg, a cosmic egg. You get that in Finnish shamanism, you get it in Hinduism, you get it in Celtic mythology to some extent. I looked at eggs in religions, and I talked about, the egg is really important for Mary Magdalene, in fact. And it's a coincidence, well, I don't know if it's a coincidence, it's in synchronicity that I ended up doing a Book of the Egg, and we're just about to have Mary Magdalene's Day, because she is always shown in icons in art as holding a red egg. And in Orthodox art, that is Mary Magdalene's thing. The tradition is that she had an audience with the Emperor Tiberius, which is interesting. And, she told him about Christ and the resurrection and all that. She complained about Pontius Pilate. And he said, no, I don't believe your resurrection story. It's as fanciful as if the egg you're holding should turn red. She was holding an egg for some reason. Whereupon it turned red. So I'd love to, track down the actual historical origin of that legend. But that's why Mary is shown holding the red egg. But eggs also appear in other religions. So, for instance, in Orphism, Phanes, the god of light and manifestation, is born from the original egg and is the first hatched being, and then creates everything else like a kind of demiurge. Now that was Orphic cosmology, and they found illustrations of Phanes in Modena and Housesteads up in the north of England, and it was part of the Roman Empire. He was assimilated to Mithras, the god of light, and then to Sol Invictus and ultimately transmorphed into the Christ, the soul, the undivided, Christ Logos. And that's all very interesting. So I talk about that in some detail. I then talk about languages and eggs, because languages are fascinating, and if you know my work, you know I'm very interested in etymology and the origin of words, and where different languages came from. How long ago did they differentiate? When did the first Homo sapiens start being able to speak? Who invented language, at what point in our evolutionary journey and so on. I go into all this stuff because we know we've been using eggs, archaeologists have discovered, for about 50,000, 60,000 years, even before. Well, language was around then. Art was around then. How far back do we go? 200,000 years, when fire first develops? Most of our ancestors wanted to cook the eggs. They didn't like to eat them raw. So cooking, I think, and fire help originate language. It's the ability to stay up late, sit around the fire, talk to your family or neighbours that creates language. And it comes with the invention of fire. And that's Prometheus for you. So then I talk about sexuality and eros. Eggs are often a symbol of eros because it's the female gift that she brings to make the new child, the new baby, the new hen or whatever. The egg is her gift. It's the goddess's gift. So the egg is a symbol of the goddess. And in a sense, sexuality is a kind of egg worship. It's like the male sperm want to gush out and, come to the egg. And that's going on all the time. That's like the lightning that's happening all over the planet at any one time. Well, that's happening all over the planet too. The little sperm are gushing out to the egg. That's how we get to be here. That's how my body's here, how yours is here. It's our embodiment. So I talk about eros and what that means and how it's sacred, and yet how women were denigrated. So menstruation, which is to do with the flushing out of the unused eggs. So why is that unclean? Surely it's sacred. And I talk about Peter Redgrove and Penelope Shuttle's book, The Wise Wound, and the importance of that cycle and why women should be restored to their sacred place, as the egg bearers, if you want. And then I talk about, a scientist contributes a chapter on the biochemistry of eggs. What are they actually made of? They're made of proteins. In what form, shape, how? And we touch there on how they evolved. Did they evolve, in situ on this planet, just from like a few wandering molecules in a little pond which was hit by lightning? Or were they seeded panspermia from other worlds where they'd evolved? When's the first fossil evidence of eggs in the fossil record? I hope the science chapters get re-amplified, and that if you're a scientist listening to this and you want to contribute a chapter, I'll publish it in the next edition. And then finally I do my last chapter, which is about, it's a lot. It's about art history. I look at the egg in art history, and I discover the egg in Dali's paintings, in Bosch's paintings, in Leonardo da Vinci, and in Hildegard von Bingen, in her Scivias, the wonderful prophetic visionary work. She has a cosmic egg, and egg as embryo and so on. So I discuss all that. And then I talk about cycles, because eggs symbolize the cycle. Life is a cycle, life, death, and the egg is the symbol of that. What are cycles? Well, cycles are the structure, if you want, of how time and space interact. And I discuss, there's a lot of work being done on cycles in biology by an international society that studies cycles, but cycles also occur in economics, in intellectual history. Even in war, people have studied there are cycles of conflict. Back in, I think, 1996, somebody predicted 2020 would be a terrible time for the USA. Cyclical studies show that this is a time of conflict. How's that possible? What are cycles? astrologers think they understand it a bit, but how does that work? So anyway, I discuss all that. And so I think it's a feast. It's a bit of a feast, this book. And I loved it because it's very multidisciplinary, multi-dimensional. I'm just ashamed that the scientist decided to take off into the night. But I do tell the story from my friend David Adams, another scientist who's, I think, he's done the ethics bit of the course, talking about how the scientists at UNESCO refused to have anything to do with the Culture of Peace project. And I told that story to my talk, I think, last week. They just walked out of the room rather than say that science might have something to do with peace. That's shocking, But that's the arrogance and the mono-tunnel vision of science. I think there's a problem with the PhD system because it forces you to narrow down your thinking. It's as if the current PhD program is a sort of indoctrination into narrowness of thinking. Well, I think we need exactly the opposite. And in my Global Green University, which I've set up, as Aristotle set up the Lyceum, in protest, we do the opposite. You can't get a PhD with us unless you join up thinking, unless it's multidisciplinary, and unless you draw on at least 10 different disciplines. So we're doing the opposite, and I regard conventional academia with its tunnel vision producing mono thinkers who they're only fit to work for the military, because militarization depends on tunnel thinking. You don't question what your superior says because he has more access to knowledge than you do. And he doesn't question who his superior, what he says, because you go all the way up to the general, only he can see the overview of generality. Well, I'm saying turn that, upside down. Let the private in the trenches of knowledge acquisition have access to the generalized thinking that hitherto has been, the preserve of the high professors. And they only get that, when they're about coming up to retire, because the academic profession is so competitive that you don't get the luxury of being able to actually do joined-up thinking until you're ready to retire. Well, that's scandalous, and I think it's blowback from the militarization of academia. You see, the military pays most of the salaries of people working in the sciences, information technology, and so on. They're all on warfare research. That's wrong, guys. That's totally wrong. That's got to stop, okay? And that's the point of the Global Green University. That's why the people of France, are with me on this. And I think around the planet, we realise, you see, this lockdown we're all suffering from is almost, possibly, I'll be cautious, possibly, but probably is related to gain-of-function research for bioweapons production. And that's why I've called on the UN to investigate all the labs around the world that could have made this thing. And that's why, of course, there's huge information warfare saying, no, Daffern's off his nut, No, I'm just saying let's look at it scientifically. A lot of voices are beginning to say that. The business about masks and so on, and, those are red herrings. Of course we should wear masks in public when you're out and about in crowded places. I mean, it's just protocol. But the most important question is to find out what caused this and to solve it. And I'm pretty sure, 90% certain, this is a military spin-off from scientists that don't know any better. And the reason they do it is because they have this tunnel vision. They never thought of the ethical implications. What? The research I'm doing might incapacitate, the world and kill 500,000 people and counting. I mean, I look every day at the figures in India, my beloved second home, and hundreds of thousands of people are getting this thing. This is utterly, utterly unforgivable. And I'm on the case. I'm going to find out what caused this, and that's one of the things the World Intellectual Forum is taking on. So that's what I've been working on. I've had a busy week, as you can see, but then history is moving like the rapids. And I've got the Mary Magdalene Studies Association conference coming up on the 22nd of July with her red egg. If anyone wants to well, you can come and listen, email me. Ibskip@gmail is the best way to contact me these days, and I'll send you the Zoom invite. And there's some very interesting speakers coming up. Right, and I'm going to finish with a poem. That is my want, because as well as everything else, as you know, I'm a poet. And let me find an appropriate poem to end with. I like to just open them at random and see. Yes. Well, this is a sweet little poem. It's called The Keys of Cordoba. And I'm going to read it. It's poem number 801 of my oeuvre. The history of this poem is quite fun. I was invited to a conference in Cordoba, which is a city I know and love well, in Andalusia. It's, for intellectuals like me, Cordoba is one of the meccas. It used to be, had the more bookshops, more libraries, more academic intellectual activity. And we're talking like the 8th, 9th, 10th century, right? It's where Ibn Rushd came from, the great commentator on Aristotle and the Quran. It's where Maimonides, the great Jewish savant, came from. And it's near where Ibn Arabi came from. He was mixing in those circles. He's the greatest Sufi of the Islamic world and a true intellectual. So you have Ibn Arabi, Maimonides, Ibn Rushd, all coming from there. And whenever I go there, I just get weak at the knees thinking, I'm walking on the place where Ibn Arabi used to chat to Ibn Rushd about what is enlightenment, So anyway, I was invited to a conference run by a Jewish savant who's professor of biology at the Schumacher College in Devon, and set up by my friend, who runs research, and Satish Kumar, who was a student of the Jain guy that inspired me, Acharya Tulsi. Hello Satish, I hope you're surviving this tragedy of what we're all facing. I know Schumacher College is going through trouble in Dartington Hall. This is why we need to disarm and fund things like the Schumacher College, like Dartington Hall. These places shouldn't scrabble for money. They should be swimming in it, and the military should be having to do jumble sales. Let's just cancel a few nuclear weapons. In fact, let's cancel all the nuclear weapons on the planet, thank you. That'll save a few trillion. Anyway, I went to this conference. We were Sufis, Jewish intellectuals, Christians, mystics, scientists. It was a wonderful event on pilgrimage, and organised by Philip Francis from Schumacher College. And I gave a paper about, spiritual pilgrimage through ideas. It was a sort of typical Daffern kind of, romp through absolute reality as if on a pilgrim's journey. And then I was staying in a youth hostel. I left. I had to leave at 4 a.m. to catch the train to then get to the airport. And that was fine. Got up, sneaked out of the room. I was sharing a door with 3 lovely ladies who were still asleep, and I sneaked out early in the dawn without waking them up. And I got to the train station, got the train, got to the airport, got on the plane, flew back to Scotland, got to Prestwick Airport, and it was about 8 o'clock at night now. It was dark, and I was looking forward to getting home to the Castle of the Muses. Went to get my keys, to get the car. I walked to the car. Where's my keys? Not in this bag, not in that bag, not in the jacket, not in that. And I suddenly remembered I'd left my jacket in the room with the sleeping ladies so as not to disturb them, and the keys were in the pocket. So the keys were in Cordoba, like 1,000 miles away. And here I am in cold Scotland at 9 at night, and I can't get into my car, and I can't drive home the 30 miles to the castle. So I had this terrible night sleeping on the benches of Prestwick Airport. And I finally got through to the people who'd organised the conference. And fortunately, one of them was able to go and get the keys and put them in the post, but they weren't going to turn up for 4 days. So I then had to get a bus back to the castle. It's a long story. And I wrote the poem. At some point during that, It's called The Keys of Cordoba. I had to tell you the story so you understand the context. Eventually the keys came back to me. They arrived in the post 4 or 5 days later. And thank you very much for sending them. But a poem came out. I left my keys in Cordoba. I who normally guard my words carefully just scattered them there, gave them away to anyone who would listen. I might as well have sat under a pillar in the ancient mosque and simply offered them up to whomever would listen. I might have let the oranges fall on my head and got dizzy with stars. I noticed a blue ceiling with the gold flecks in, pointing to great mystery. A sycamore tree gives seed as keys. A poet gives seed as nouns. A believer gives away faith as doubt, to bring tired minds back to the friend, to be unwrapped when we all delve and dwell in our moist souls together. We cry from here both sorrows and joys. We dip into the core form our mother birthed us from. Thales was right. Our soul is the sea. When the waters mingle, new worlds are born. Moses is left behind by Al-Khidr, speechless. I left my keys in Cordoba. I offered them up like a mystery for the nose of the friend to find. One found them, and another returned them to me. Such trials are meant simply to immerse our thankfulness, to moisten the inner flow, to make the heart lap fully and truly in rhythm with the tides and the moon. She peeks out like a shy maiden glancing each month, and she slowly undresses before us, night by night, a little more. I left my keys in Cordoba, under the orange trees, where I had swiftly glimpsed the patios of the ancients, with traces of Rome and Babylon, Baghdad and Sidon, still grooved into the vertically arranged stones, and aphrodisiac potions still floating on the mild scented air. So when you try and find them, use them. See what you can open with them. Then return them to me. I will unlock all my old obstinacy, my doubting, my fear and hesitancy, my protective